And you start at the first word and you just start writing your stream of consciousness till you have all the stuff you wanted to say down on the piece of paper. The critical thinker approaches this a little bit differently, because writing is not just about expressing what you're trying to say, but it's about clarifying in your own head what you're trying to say. Indeed, when you start writing and when you finish writing a paper, hopefully the way you've thought about whatever it is you're writing about has changed. So I suggest, and here's my approach to writing, and again, sort of take it or leave it, this is this is the Benoit Jacob approach to writing, which I don't always follow, because very often I am up at midnight writing a paper that's due at 7 a.m. But, so that doesn't change. That's another story. That doesn't change for the job.
Without deadlines, nothing
Yeah.
happens.
So what I do is I first do the stream of consciousness thing. Because I say, here's what I want to write about. Let me just write down what I think it is I want to write about. I don't edit, so there's a few things at this stage, right? I use plain English, I don't use any equations, and I don't edit. Okay? In this first phase, I'm just writing pure stream of consciousness. Okay? Then I take a look at this and I start to say, okay, this is what I think I want to write about. Now, how is it that I'm actually going to express this on a piece of paper? And then we go through the normal process of outlining a paper, right? So what are my big headings? So then given those big headings, how do each of those sections sort of look? So I start outlining a paper. This gives me some sense of, okay, so given what I thought I wanted to talk about, how does this actually work in some kind of logical argument? And of course, things will start to, it won't fit exactly right, but this is part of the thinking process. I then go and I start filling in the sections and to what ends up being relatively a quote-unquote first draft. At that point in the game, I'm still unwilling to call it a first draft. And as I tell all my students the first day of class, what I expect then from them, which is the same thing I sort of hold myself to more or less, is that once you've done that sort of reasonably good first draft, is you edit it. And the editing process is not just about clarity of language, but it is again about clarifying in your own head what your argument is. Every word matters. So the process I've developed, and this was actually so an economist by the fellow by the name of David Merriman. He does sort of local public finance and city stuff, you guys might know. Anyways, he gave me this advice after he read my first proposal of my draft dissertation. Actually, my dissertation proposal. I gave it to him. And he said, here's what you have to do. He said, go back and reread this. He said, but don't read it from start to finish. Read it from your last page to your first page. And he said, this way it gets you out of the sort of, just following the pattern thing. And he said, read every page, one by one, and look at that page and ask yourself, is there a paragraph on this page that I can cut and that page still makes sense? And go through all 50 pages of your proposal and do that. He said, then go do the same thing. Read it again from back to start. But this time read it paragraph by paragraph. And ask yourself if there's a sentence you can get rid of. And if there's a sentence you can get rid of and that paragraph still makes sense, cut it. He said, then you have to read it a third time. He said, start from back to finish. He said, read it sentence by sentence by sentence. And find every single word that you can cut and that sentence still makes sense. When you've done that, you have your first draft. Only after you've done all that. Now the point here is twofold, right? So the writing process needs to be clear. And I have read, so after I heard that, right, of course I was
discouraged. By the way, there's never been a paper presented at a conference
that goes through that. Yeah, of course not.
Including David.
That's right. Yeah, no, exactly. But that's okay, because this is the point. Yeah, this is the ideal, right? And the point of this is that there are a couple.
Do as he says.
Not as exactly. But when you do read, so I again was very discouraged after this conversation because of course there been lots of additional work, and I wasn't so happy about that. So I went to sort of see if I could find some evidence where people give me a different approach to writing. And really, unfortunately, across the board, you won't find that. Because the point of writing is to be, at this stage in the game, right, at graduate school stage of the game, is to be crystal clear. Every word you say matters. Every word has meaning. And the misuse of a word is the misuse of your whole paper, right? If you misuse a word here or there, and you see it all the time. Like I said, this is the ideal, right? I was just lamenting to Tom Willett and Professor Denzow here a couple weeks ago about how there's a whole group of papers that talk in public financial management actually, that talk about moral hazard. But they use it in such a loose way that they've actually used it wrong. And so I'm very excited because I'm going to actually write a series of papers critiquing it. And, you know, one of the dreams for a graduate, for a young scholar, I highly recommend. I don't know if it's a great strategy or not, but you know, when you want to get tenure, what you want to do is get your papers highly cited. And so one of the really great strategies, I think, I might be wrong, I think is you want to write a paper that everyone disagrees with. Right? Because then everyone is writing, but oh, Jacob wrote this crazy paper, and your citation count skyrockets everywhere. Because no one ever looks at sort of why they're citing you, they just look at your citation count. So I think it's a great strategy, right? But we'll see how that plays out for them. So anyways, you know, Tom Borcherding actually has a class to go to, so I'm going to wrap it up. The only reason he didn't go second is because I presented with this group actually at a session last year on the financial crisis, and I followed Tom Borcherding, and I swore I would never do that again. It's not the act you want to follow. So anyways, so let me just wrap up with a couple things. So I talked about reading and writing and sort of the importance of this for becoming a critical thinker, because that's ultimately the goal of graduate school, is to become a critical thinker. Not to just know lots of stuff, but to know how to critique lots of stuff. How to know whether or not you should believe the stuff that's presented before you. And there's a couple ways that, again, I'm young, so I'm not wise, but I'm trying to figure out sort of how to develop these skills, right? Of course, the obvious one is just to practice. But to practice not in the way that, you know, so you're just every now and then writing a paper or something like that. Aaron Wildavsky wrote this great book. Aaron Wildavsky is a political scientist who wrote just immense amounts of stuff. And he wrote this book, at the tail end of his career, he wrote this great book that I think everyone should read called Craftways. And it's about being a scholar. It's essentially just his ideas about being a scholar. And he writes 2 chapters, one on reading and one on writing. And he says the key to developing these skills is to treat it just like an athlete treats practice, right? Just like an athlete trains. So it's not just that you read more stuff and you write more stuff, but that you're disciplined about it. So read and write every day at the same time, at the same place. So if you find you like to read and write at a coffee shop every day from 9 to 10, do it every day from 9 to 10, just to develop the skill. Practice it. Practice it over and over and over again. The other piece of advice I picked up was so a colleague of mine, this is one of these sort of 6 degrees of separations thing. A colleague of mine, Bart Wilson, who's over at Chapman, is a student of Vernon Smith, who's the Nobel Prize-winning economist in experimental economics. So I know Bart, I don't know Vernon. But Bart told me that one of the pieces of advice he got from Vernon that I think is a great piece of advice for all graduate students, PhD students in particular, right, is what you want to do is you want to read as broadly as possible. So read across a range of disciplines, okay? But write very narrowly. So don't write on all these topics that you read about. Find the topic that you're after and start writing very narrowly on it. This is the way to develop a deep understanding of something. So read broadly and research very narrowly. The last piece of advice I got was I went to these Institute for Humane Studies, which is they're sort of a bit of a libertarian, right-wing crazies kind of institution, but they're very good. But they're very, very good, and they're very good because they sort of value interesting ideas more than just being facetious.
And they're free.
And they're free, yeah, exactly. These seminars are great.
You get it. You can travel money.
Yeah, they actually pay for you to go. It's a wonderful experience. I think any graduate student who gets a chance to go should go. But they have a motto, okay? And the motto is to sleep less and think more. And I'll tell you, my sister, she's one of these life coaches. She's a life coach. And she does very well. She makes way more money than I do. But her sort of mantra then is balance, right? Life balance, right? You should sort of balance things out. And we have constant arguments about this.
Right.
Because I absolutely, especially when you're in graduate school, absolutely 100% disagree. Forget life balance. Okay? You are in graduate school. You get 2 years if you're a master's student, 4 to 6 years if you're a PhD student. Don't forget about yoga, forget about everything else that you want to do. Just, no offense, Karen, I wasn't a direct